Now, one of the most underrated things The Lion King 2 does well is representing the role of the elder's voice in a community. Rafiki isn't overbearing. He doesn't pop in with unsolicited advice every 5 minutes. His interventions are calculated, timely, and incredibly impactful, which is exactly how wisdom should function in leadership and mentorship. He steps in only when necessary. He ensures Simba knows Kovu saved Kiara, subtly guiding the king toward fair judgment. He facilitates Kiara and Kovu's romance, understanding its greater significance for the unity of the prides, and most importantly, he is the only one in direct contact with Mufasa from the other side. He is the link between the past wisdom and the present action, which is why it's so ironic that Simba is so fixated on the past himself. Because honestly, this is why Simba shouldn't be trying so hard to copy Mufasa. We already have Rafiki as the voice of tradition and legacy. The last thing the community needs is for their active leader to also be obsessed with the past. Leaders have to look forward, not just backward. Rafiki preserves history. Simba should be shaping the future. One of Rafiki's most important moments in the film is when Kovu is beginning to unravel. There's this key scene where Kovu starts opening up to Kiara, getting vulnerable about his feelings, but then he panics. He feels like he's saying too much and he tries to pull away. He tries to leave. This moment is psychologically significant because it's an example of conditioning trying to reassert itself. When someone has been conditioned into a specific identity, especially one tied to loyalty, survival, or purpose, moments of self-doubt or vulnerability feel dangerous. Kovu has spent his whole life being told who he is. He's Scar's heir, he's a warrior, he's the one who will kill Simba. His entire sense of self has been constructed around that role. So what happens when he starts to feel something different? Well, his conditioning fights back, fights for survival. This is called cognitive dissonance. The tension between two conflicting beliefs. Imagine it like a tug of war. Kovu wants to be with Kiara, we can definitely see that, but that contradicts everything he's been taught. His mind is caught between his old identity, Zira's Kovu, and his emerging identity, his true self, free from her influence. And because the old identity is what he's always known, he retreats into what feels safe. This is something we see in real life with people leaving cults, abusive relationships, rigid belief systems, even certain religions. When they start to feel genuine change, the mind freaks out and pulls them back into what is familiar, even if it's harmful. And that's where Rafiki comes in. Rafiki appears at the perfect moment, almost as if he can sense the internal battle happening inside Kovu. And how does he challenge Kovu's conditioning? With love. He doesn't confront him with logic or reason, because at this stage, Kovu isn't ready for that. Instead, Rafiki facilitates an experience that makes Kovu feel something deeper than his fear, love for Kiara. Because here's the thing, love is the ultimate disruptor of conditioning. Hate is taught, division is taught, but love is felt, love is natural. It bypasses rational defenses and goes straight to the heart. And Rafiki, as a symbol of elder wisdom, understands this better than anyone. He knows that Kovu's internal war isn't going to be won through debates or arguments, it's going to be won through experience. So he does what every wise elder would do. He nudges Kovu toward an emotional experience that directly contradicts everything he has been taught. He reminds him of what's already inside him: love, connection, and a desire for something beyond revenge. Rafiki doesn't force Kovu to change, not 1 second. He simply gives him the space to feel differently, and that's what wisdom looks like. Not control, not enforcement, just giving someone the freedom to explore themselves outside of the roles of society, in a completely safe space. And because of that, Kovu finally lets himself break free. Alright, Timon and Pumbaa act as Simba's informal enforcers, but let's be real, they're more like his comic relief and emotional support system. They're the outsiders who were integrated into the Pride lands through Simba, which in a way proves that the community can be welcoming, but only when trust has been established, which is a good thing. At the same time, they don't seem to have a deeper role though. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing either. Not every member of a community needs to be a pillar of power. But Simba does use them as extensions of his control. They are the blind followers in a way, the ones so happy to belong that they never question authority, the ones that they're so happy that someone else is taking care of the hard things while they can get to kind of laze around. This is an important aspect of community. Sometimes loyalty becomes compliance, and that's where we see the problem of over-reliance on leadership. Instead of challenging Simba, Timon and Pumbaa adopt the same overprotection over Kiara that he does. Even though we already see that this overprotection has made her completely dysfunctional as a hunter, they continue continue reinforcing it. They care, sure, but their loyalty overrides critical thinking. But now let's go to the real juicy stuff. Zira's enforcers, meaning Nuka and Vitani. Now, if Timon and Pumbaa are comedic, passive enforcers, then Nuka is a desperate, tragic one. He is the failure, the overlooked, the one desperately trying to prove himself. Yet he is ultimately expendable in Zira's eye. This is where we see the shadow side of community. Unfairness. Nuka was the oldest. In any traditional system, he should have been the heir. But because Scar handpicked Kovu, Nuka was discarded. His entire existence is spent watching from the sidelines, yearning for a love and validation that he sees is possible with Kovu, but has never been extended to him. And let's talk about the psychological trap he's in. He can't blame Scar because, Scar was the great king, the golden age, the one who set the rules. He can't blame his mother either because, she is the leader, and more importantly, because he desperately craves her approval. He can't even blame himself, actually, because he has already committed to the role of eternal victim, so, it's hard to take responsibility when in that role. So, who's left? Why, of course, his little brother Kovu, the chosen one. And this is where we see the real tragedy of his character. He doesn't understand that his anger is misplaced. If he ever wanted to heal, he would have to accept one brutal truth, that he will never be king. If there was anyone to blame, it should be Scar. But blaming him won't change anything regardless, and this is where Nuka gets trapped. He can't move forward because his entire identity has become wrapped around his resentment and sense of injustice. His way of coping is to obsess over what could have been. And in the end, I think that's what makes his death so tragic. He dies still trying to prove himself, still believing that if he could just get one chance, he could have been great. But the truth is, we will never know. Maybe under different circumstances, he could have been a strong leader, maybe not. But the tragedy is that he never even got the chance to find out. From a Jungian perspective, Nuka fits the orphan archetype, but twisted into its shadow form, the neglected child who becomes bitter and resentful. He represents how unfairness in a community can create deep emotional wounds, and how, without resolution, those wounds can become the person's entire identity. So, if you want to prevent people like Nuka from forming, communities must 1. Acknowledge individual contributions, not just hierarchy. He didn't have to be king, but he should have been given a meaningful role that made him feel valued. 2. Encourage personal growth outside of leadership roles. Not everyone has to be king, not everyone has to lead, but everyone should have a path to success in their own right. Now, Vitani is an interesting case because, unlike Nuka, she never resents Kovu for being chosen. She's raised in the same harsh conditions, but we never see her feeling bitter about her place in the hierarchy. Instead, she is the true enforcer. She is sharp, ruthless, and incredibly loyal, but not blindly. And that's the difference between Timon and Pumbaa and Vitani. This is the key difference between her and Nuka as well. Nuka was bitter, rebellious, and desperate for approval. Vitani is dedicated, strategic, and driven by a greater cause. But the biggest difference is that Vitani's loyalty was conditional. She never shared Zira's thirst for revenge. She simply believed that following her mother was the only way to survive. She was raised in poverty and scarcity, not enough food, not enough water, but she had hope that once Kovu defeated Simba, the suffering would stop. For her, this was never personal. She wasn't fighting because she hated Simba. She was fighting because she believed it was the only path to a better life. And that's why she is able to break free from her conditioning in the end. When Kiara stops fighting and actually welcomes the outsiders into the Pride Lands, Vitani sees something she never considered possible, a different way forward. And that's when she betrays her own mother, because in that moment, she realizes the truth. Zira was never fighting for the Pride, she was fighting for herself. Vitani's moment of defection is huge because it exposes Zira's true nature to everyone, and this is why individual choice is crucial in a community, you see. When Vitani makes her own decision, it creates a ripple effect. It forces the other lionesses question their own beliefs, and Zira reacts instantly with violence. I mean, the woman literally threatens to kill her own daughter. And that's the moment the rest of the Pride sees who Zira truly is as well. That's when they realize this was never about justice, it was about revenge, and that's why they all abandon her. Without individual choice, we never get moments like these, you see. If people are not allowed to think for themselves, they will never challenge authority, and communities that cannot be challenged will always become cults. Now, that was fun, but let's go to the point of this video, okay?
It's about fucking time.
Why communities fail and how to build an utopia. Yeah, I'm promising big, and I might just disappoint you, so let's make sure we set the right expectations here, okay? Community is often romanticized as the solution to all problems, as I said at the beginning. But truth is that community is not a solution, it's a responsibility.
Oh, I don't think I like this.
Real community requires maturity, self-discovery, exploration. It isn't something that just exists. It is built, sustained, and most importantly, evolves. Yet very often communities are treated like legacies that should never change, as if what worked for one generation should remain untouched for the next. This rigid approach to community doesn't just limit growth, you see, it actively prevents necessary change. The reason communities resist change is rooted in a psychological concept called system justification theory. This theory explains why people defend existing structures, even if they're harmful or even if they're outdated, because they feel that challenging the system threatens their sense of security and identity. The core idea is that people would rather rationalize the flaws in their community than risk destabilizing it completely. If you've been raised with the belief that your community is inherently good, admitting that it might be flawed means admitting that you have to change, and change is terrifying. We've seen how hard it was for Simba, but he did it regardless. And we can see this also in real life. For instance, the Roman society was built on a rigid hierarchy and traditions that over time became obsolete. Instead of adapting to the changing economy, to the military threats and the internal corruption, leaders clung to the old system, leading to economic collapse and social decay in the end. Another example would be feudalism in Europe, like for centuries, feudal society functioned on strict class divisions, even when it became clear that urbanization and trade offered new opportunities. The nobility resisted change because they benefited from the old system, until revolutions like the French Revolution forced change. All of these show a pattern. The fear of losing stability leads to stagnation, and stagnation leads to collapse. Simba's pride didn't get to the collapse because change was accepted in a timely manner, so keep in mind that a healthy community isn't something that just happens. It's the natural result of individuals who have done their own work first, and the movie actually demonstrates it perfectly. One of the biggest misconceptions Simba has as a leader is that if he just maintains unity, everything will be fine. But unity without adaptability leads to stagnation. Kiara is expected to accept her role without question, yet she struggles to connect with what being a queen actually means. Kovu is expected to fulfill Scar's legacy, yet deep down, he doesn't truly understand what Scar represents. Both of them are products of their communities, yet they are the only ones actively questioning their roles. Kiara and Kovu's personal journeys aren't just about love, they're about challenging the beliefs that their communities have built around them. And because they are the only ones doing the work, they are the ones who ultimately push their communities toward change. A community without self-aware individuals doesn't evolve, it repeats cycles. So, how to build a utopian community?